G'day, everyone. I'm Michael Chato, the incoming Executive Director of NIF Australia, taking over from Liam Gatroy in May. I'm really excited to be working with you all at this critical moment for Israelis, Palestinians, and all who care about the state of democracy there. Indeed, the far-right Netanyahu government has only been in power for a couple of months to date, and yet, since then, we've seen crackdowns on the judiciary, massive increases in settler violence and civilian deaths, and a burgeoning protest movement pushing back against the chaos and overreach of this newly formed government. I'm sure you all know this already, but NIF was made for moments like this. We've been around in Australia for more than a decade, and in that time, we've dispersed more than $5 million to human rights and civil rights groups in Israel. We've been supporters of organizations taking an active role in the protests right now, and will continue to support the organizations doing what it takes to fight for a better country for all Israelis and Palestinians. So with that, I'd love to turn it over to Liam to lead us in conversation with some of the incredible activists helping to lead the democratic pushback in Israel right now. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Michael. I'll add my thanks to everyone for joining. I'll be taking over from me very shortly, which is very exciting for the next phase of NIF in Australia. I want to start by acknowledging tonight that I am on the lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and I want to pay my respect to their elders past and present, and acknowledge that this is sovereign land that has never been ceded. And I also wanted to say that personally, I'm very much looking forward to the referendum later this year, where we can, for the first time, acknowledge the unique place that First Nations peoples have in this country and enshrine a voice in our constitution. To tonight's event now, this has been a very trying and very difficult period on the ground in Israel-Palestine, one of the most difficult in a while. Sometimes we like to think of this moment as having two fronts: a domestic front, where we see hundreds of thousands of Israelis protesting against the Netanyahu's planned changes to the very institutions that ensure Israel's democratic character, and then a West Bank or an occupied territories front, where violence and terror has been increasing. We know, though, that it's a little bit of a furphy to think of them as two separate fronts. They are very much linked. They're very much related. They flow from each other. One is very much a function of the other. So as much as we're going to try and focus on one, we also need to acknowledge the inseparability of these two issues that are happening at the moment in Israel. But we are going to focus more on what's happening in the West Bank right now. We are joined tonight after the horrific pogrom that happened about 10 days ago now, in the Palestinian village of Huwara, where Jewish settlers, responding to the murder of two Israeli brothers a few days before, earlier that day, that hundreds of Jewish settlers descended on a Palestinian village, torched homes, businesses, schools, and vehicles, injured more than 100 people, killed one Palestinian. So we're going to talk a little bit tonight about that horrific incident. We're going to talk about the why and the wherefore, and in particular, I think we're going to zoom in on one issue, or one of the issues, which is why the role that the Israeli military played in this, in not stopping this from happening, and what it means on a structural level. So we're joined tonight by three activists that we have on the ground. We're joined by Issa Amro, the founder of Youth Against Settlements in Hebron, an incredibly brave activist who I've had the privilege of meeting more than a couple of times. By Avner Gvaryahu, who's the co-director of Breaking the Silence, who many of you will know from when he was in Australia a couple of years ago, and in fact the years before that as well. And we're also joined by Shira Livne from the Association for Civil Rights in Israel, NIF's flagship grantee, and she's the director of the Occupied Territories Unit at ACRI. We do have a comment and chat function if you're watching us live. You can add your comment on the YouTube page if you would like, and we can make sure to get to them. Issa is particularly busy today, and he's asked that we start with him because he may have to jump off a little bit early. So Issa, if we can start with you, can you talk a little bit about how you saw that horrific incident in Huwara, and whether I'm most interested into whether you saw it as an outlier or just a continuation of the kinds of actions that we've seen from settlers for so long.
Yes, what I saw in Huwara, myself, I lived in it. 2008, the Israeli army evacuated the settlers from a Palestinian building near Kiryat Arba. the same. What happened in Huwara happened in Hebron 2008 on December 7th and 6th. And it was between the settlers who were burning the houses, burning the Palestinian properties, attacking everything Palestinian around. And even I saw them attacking Israeli military, attacking Israeli police. And unfortunately, many of the settlers who participated in that pogrom, they are leaders in Israel and they are ministers now. So it was not a surprise. I knew exactly what happened in Huwara, and even 2008, Olmert, the former Israeli prime minister, described what happened in Hebron as a pogrom, the same as what happened in Huwara. No accountability for the violent settlers. Nobody was arrested, nobody was charged, nobody was indicted. In spite that, I gave the Israeli police, me personally, a lot of videos, a lot of evidence that for the settlers who participated in the pogrom. It's not random, it's organized, they're trained. Their lawyer was Itamar Ben-Gvir since very long time for the price tag and the hilltop youth, and many other pogroms happened in my lifetime since from 2008 until Huwara pogrom. And the Israeli military system, they don't take in consideration our security as Palestinians. So every time there is a Jewish holiday in Hebron, yesterday we had Purim in Hebron, that we are not part of the security measures of the army. They don't care about our security, despite they know in advance that the Israeli settlers will attack our houses and will attack our properties and they will use violence. And even they announce it. They say, let's do this, let's do that. The army doesn't do anything. The police doesn't do anything. So this kind of pogrom will continue if we, keep talking only about the pogrom, not about the atmosphere, about the military system, about the support of the Israeli media, about the support of the Israeli politician to this kind of violence toward the Palestinians. The Palestinian who killed the two Israeli settlers was killed yesterday with another 5 Palestinians in Jenin. But the settlers who did what they did in Huwara and the Palestinian was killed by the settler, he was nobody is accountable about that violence. So the Palestinians are accountable for their violence, and the Israeli settlers and the Israeli army brutality, and they are not accountable at all.
Avner, I want to zoom in with you something that that Issa brought up, which is about the military's role, and I flagged earlier there's something we want to speak about. I found in our office just a couple of hours ago 2 reports that Breaking the Silence that Shofrim have put out in the past about settler violence in the West Bank, but also about the influence that settlers have on the IDF's command. Can you talk about the particular role that the IDF had in this, and I guess you also please your broader reflections on what happened last week in Huwara?
Yeah, so thank you so much, and it's always a pleasure and honor to be on a discussion with brave and smart activists, and sort of building a bit off what Issa mentioned. I think that part of what's important to understand and sort of break down is that inherent to the occupation, definitely the Israeli occupation, is sort of an ecosystem of violence, right? Those of you who have been on the ground in Hebron or the South Hebron Hills with us, or with many other brilliant organizations and activists, either north part of the West Bank, Jordan Valley, we see a similar kind of phenomenon and mentality. And in that sense, Issa speaking to us from Hebron, we many times talk about Hebron as a microcosm of this. And when we talk about it being a microcosm, we're basically explaining this ecosystem. And we have to understand that this ecosystem of settlement presence, expansion of settlements and outposts that are also illegal under Israeli law, not only international law, or the newer phenomenon of agricultural farms that are sort of grabbing land, built in with the settlement enterprise. You have a system of control and control, quote unquote, that basically enables the settlement expansion. But it's not a passive reality. For years, the language we spoke about in Breaking the Silence and in other organizations, we talked about soldiers standing idly by, right? Many examples, evidences, videos, testimonies of soldiers or Palestinian activists filming these cases, or even official reports talking about the fact that soldiers see violence and do nothing to stop it. That was really sort of the norm. It still is the norm, which is a total contradiction of not only international law that puts a responsibility on the military force to protect the occupied people, but also under Israeli law. Official Israeli military law gives soldiers the authority and the responsibility to arrest, detain Israeli citizens, Israeli settlers who are violent. Right? We see soldiers arresting Israeli anti-occupation activists all the time, so there isn't a problem for a soldier to detain or arrest an Israeli citizen. But they don't do that. They don't do that because they're told not to do that. And there's a separation where soldiers, even though it's in contradiction to the law, what happens on the ground is soldiers see their mission as protecting the settlers from the Palestinians. And it's basically not their mission as they see it to protect the Palestinians from the settlers. But the newer, I think, development, and this is where the events in Huwara and the entire region, I mean, definitely the entire area of Huwara, but this is also true to other places in the West Bank, that almost on a daily basis we see reality of extreme violence. I think what we've seen in Huwara, and this is part of this trend, is that soldiers are not only standing idly by, but are active participants in these attacks. And this, I think, for many of us who've been following the realities very closely, I think shows where the movement is going. I think this is definitely an outcome of the incitement coming from the government, the energy coming out of the cabinet, Smotrich, Ben Gvir, the video that Issa filmed in Hebron just a month plus ago, where a soldier literally says, Ben Gvir will make sure there'll be order here, right? A soldier that later on one of his friends or one of his fellow soldiers attacked an activist. This is, I think, part of a trend that we're seeing, not only standing idly by, but actively participating. And I think that if we want to see an end to this phenomenon, obviously we have to bring an end to the Israeli occupation. But first and foremost, we have to recognize the fact that the army does not see its job in protecting Palestinians. And therefore, there is literally no one there to protect Palestinians who are routinely attacked by settlers and many times by the Israeli army itself.
Issa, are you able to? I think we've lost Shira for the moment, hoping that she'll be able to come back soon. Issa, are you able to talk a little bit about that incident that you may not have been there, that Avner described, which was your interaction with a soldier while you were giving a tour? Because I think that highlights also the army's active role in the ongoing violence that Palestinians face, and the fact that there's no one to protect Palestinians in this environment.
Yes, as Palestinians, we don't feel safe. We don't feel that we have any protection from the Israeli settlers' violence, and even from the Israeli military brutality. I can say that I really suffer a lot from the soldiers who usually pack up the settlers' violence, and sometimes proud of it, and even they coordinate between each other this kind of attacks because they see us as an enemy. The soldiers and the Israeli government, the Israeli media, the army spokesperson, they want to hide Hebron as an example of of what's going on and what will be in the future, because Hebron is as Avner described, it's microcosm of the Israeli occupation. If you come to Hebron, you will see closed streets, closed markets, separated, segregated streets, markets, neighborhoods. The area where I was born, I'm not allowed to visit. All my childhood in the city, I'm not able to really, go to the same corners and the same streets where I was playing when I was a child. And yesterday in Purim, settlers were dancing. Itamar Ben-Gvir is, wearing a policeman, dress and dancing in the streets where I was born. He has all that quality life and all that, rights. And me as a Palestinian, I live under the Israeli military law. It's mainly about that. The settlers are under the civil law, and we as Palestinians under the Israeli military law. So two sets of law in the same area. So I was walking around with an American journalist and with a Belgium photographer. They wanted to see the streets, the closed houses, and especially that we have part in Shuhada Street where Palestinians go in from the back door, from the roof, from their neighbors' yards to get into their homes because the main door is shut off by the Israeli military. And all that closure started 1994 after the Ibrahimi Mosque massacre, by Baruch Goldstein, who is a hero for Itamar Ben-Gvir and for the Kahanist. So I was showing him around. The soldier didn't like me showing that because the journalist was walking in the main street, Shuhada Street, and I was walking on the graveyard in parallel. To show him and to describe to him, the soldier tried to stop me from doing that. I really didn't want to argue with the soldier, and I told him, okay, we don't have time, and I continued to the spot where I'm allowed to meet, Lawrence Wright, an American New Yorker staff journalist. And when I reached to the point, I found that the soldier was forcing the Belgian photographer to delete her video, which she filmed in the street. So I told the soldier, you're not allowed to do this. But the soldier, has that much power. He has a government supporting him. He has a media will cover his crime. Didn't listen. And he even wanted me to delete the videos of him saying that we are not allowed to film and we should delete the videos. Then violently, he detained me to Shuhada Street and threatened me, intimidated me. And then, the video, the famous video of him pushing me, to the ground and kicking me and trying to even beat me more. And I was kept for 40 minutes without an ambulance. I called the 100, the Israeli police. I asked them for an ambulance, and they asked me literally, are you Arab or Jew? I told them I am an Arab, but it's a Jewish area. Palestinian ambulance can't reach. 40 minutes without any medication. Then the Israeli spokesperson tried to say that I attacked a soldier. I refused medical treatment, and I provoked the soldier, and I'm doing this all the time. Then Itamar Ben-Gvir tweeted about me as that I am an anarchist. With all respect to anarchist, I'm not. I have many anarchist friends. I respect their choice, but I'm not an anarchist. And he said the soldier did the right thing, and they will, he is backing him up. What was the surprise? The Israeli media didn't condemn the soldier act, and they became aware about it, and they gave it kind of attention because of the video and because of the international coverage and because of the journalists, not because of me, not because that the soldier did something wrong to a human rights defender who was completely pacifist with him. The Israeli media described me as a professional provocator, and now I have harder time. I was arrested on November for filming a soldier hitting up an Israeli, Israeli visitor, breaking his cheekbone, and a soldier saying that Itamar Ben-Gvir will make Seder. So I see the atmosphere is kind of escalation, and I see the influence of Itamar Ben-Gvir ideology. The Kahanis, the Kach movement is growing among soldiers. So when the soldiers have the ideology of Ben-Gvir, media covering their violence and their brutality, and then the Israeli army doesn't make them accountable. There is a huge space under the military law that they can do whatever they want to us. So we are stuck as Palestinians, and this kind of actions, really, what happened to me, I see it almost every day by the police, the army, the brutality. Palestinians are living under occupation and apartheid since very long time. And now we are facing the brutality of the army, the brutality of the Israeli police, and the settler violence, which is growing a lot since the new government, or since the result of the recent Israeli election.
Thank you, Issa. Thank you for sharing that story. It was, I don't know how many people have seen the video that Issa was and Avner were talking about. It's a pretty horrific thing to see the level of control and power that the soldiers have, and the way it was exercised without any regard for what the established rules are on the ground, or kind of the basic dignity of another human being standing in front of him. Shira, we've got you now. We've lost you and had you back, but we've got you now. I wanted you to talk a little bit, please, about the broader legal context that Issa alluded to. And one of the other booklets that I managed to get from our office today is an ACRI booklet that was produced about 9 years ago called One Rule, Two Legal Systems, because that really is what it is on the ground. Issa spoke of an escalation with the new government. How much of that, though, how much of what we're seeing legally is because of the new government, and how much has been there since day one of the occupation?
Right. Well, thank you. And sorry for being a little bit disconnected and missing most of what Issa and maybe Avner spoke about. I'm sure it was very interesting. So I think what is important to understand that a lot of what we're seeing was already there, right? The lack of accountability, the daily violence by settlers, it was already there for many years. But what we're seeing now with the new government is that there is really no more any kind of stopping mechanisms, because within the government, the people who are leading the policies are the people who are behind the settler movement, who are approving of religious fundamentalism and are very straightforward, saying that they want to have full sovereignty, Israeli sovereignty over the West Bank, aka annexation. All of this is nothing new in the sense that we are seeing smaller steps to push forward towards annexation for many years. But right now we are seeing a government that this is its official policy. And one of the promises that they have made within the coalition agreements were to kind of finalize the harmonization of Israeli law application on Israelis who are living in the West Bank, and kind of finalize the two systems of law, one for Palestinians and one for Israelis, and also to change how the military govern the territory, in a sense of kind of turning more and more aspects of the civil administration to under the power of government offices, in a sense to kind of change the nature of the occupation as it would, with the aim to have full Israeli sovereignty in the end, where the Palestinians are none to be found in those agreements or the policies that the government is declaring, right? They only speak about the settlers. They only speak about how to expand settlements, how to regularize outposts, how to take over more and more land. And the result is going to be to kind of pushing out much more aggressively Palestinians. And the result is that the settler get a very clear message. You are the owners here. We have your back. You can do what you want. And this message is no longer being said behind closed doors. It's being said very clearly via social media and in, different kind of statement that members of the government and the coalition are giving. And then the settlers hear the message and they're acting accordingly.
I want to do a little bit, get a little bit more. I was going to ask Issa. Here we go. Issa's back. I was going to ask about the whether the I guess the degree to which this rise in violence in the West Bank is playing within the protests in Israel. Actually, maybe Avner, you can start by talking about the scale of the protests. And it seems like in the last week, after this pogrom in Huwara, there was a little bit more of a discourse around this issue. So Avner, maybe if you start by talking about it on the Israel side, and Issa afterwards, I'd like to hear how much the discourse and the protest movement in Israel has filtered into Palestine, and whether there is any understanding of a pushback against Bibi. So maybe you go first, up now.
I think that sort of something to sort of take into consideration, or an idea I'd like to maybe share, is I think a big challenge, and this is true to all of us doing anti-occupation work between the river to the sea, and definitely to many of us who are Israelis thinking about sort of inequality that our government is leading, and we definitely see the connections between as Shira mentioned, sort of the anti-democratic norms that affect the entire region on many different levels. But I do think that there is a fundamental sort of different mindset that I think plays out in the protests, where I think that still for the majority of Israelis, and definitely I believe so also for the majority of the protesters, there's a fundamental struggle for civil rights, and the attempt to have Palestinian citizens of Israel to be part of this protest is connected to that. We're thinking about the civil rights struggle, and obviously Palestinian citizens of Israel are fellow citizens, and they should be part of the protests. I think on the other hand, there's a different perspective that looks at the reality, and especially the reality in the OPT, not obviously as a civil rights struggle, but as a struggle against a military dictatorship. And I think that is a very different way to look at a same struggle. I think that what we're seeing play out in the protests and in the last couple of weeks is interesting because it's blurring that up a bit. We suddenly start hearing from what was seen and what is seen as sort of much more mainstream voices within Israel, referring to the judicial overturn as a potential dictatorship. So suddenly that language enters, the conversation. The talk about refusal of serving, and definitely I would say one of the most interesting examples that is directly connected to our conversation are the chants on the streets, but not only, also on the main stage in Tel Aviv, definitely Jerusalem, Beersheba, of people chanting, "Where were you in Huwara? Efo haytem b'Huwara?" And where were you is both to the government that allowed this program to happen, but also to the security forces. And I think that that's an interesting transition. I don't want to put too much on it, because I think that as we've seen in other protests, those of us who protested around Balfour in front of Netanyahu's residence maybe remember the chants that called for justice for Iyad el-Khalak, a young Palestinian that was shot and killed in Jerusalem. And I think that there was and there isn't no justice for Iyad, and I think that there's also a danger to put too much on the specific chants. But I do think that there's an interesting moment where what we started calling sort of the annexation camp, or the camp in Israel that is dreaming about a full-scale apartheid and pushing for that, Smotrich Ben Gvir, now has so much power that it's putting mainstream Israelis, sort of the control camp or the centrist camp, in a position where they're forced, at least some of them are forced to pick a side. And I think that is interesting, and that is something that has, I think, interesting and maybe even positive potential.
Certainly, finding something positive at this moment is not easy. So thank you for trying to identify that, Avner. Some of this was Avner had an op-ed in Haaretz yesterday where he spoke about some of these issues as well, I think. Issa, will you talk a little bit about the degree to which the protests in Israel have reflected back into the OPT and your awareness of that bleeding in, like Avner's been talking about?
Yes. First, I want to be very clear. We, as Palestinians, we are not allowed for our to practice our general assembly, and non-violence resistance is not allowed. So protesting for Palestinian is illegal according to the Israeli military system. Me personally, I was beaten, I was arrested, detained, indicted, convicted in the military court for only protesting peacefully against the Israeli occupation. So it's a difference between the Israelis who are allowed to protest against whatever they want to, against the judicial overreturn or whatever they want to call it. But in the West Bank, we don't have anything. We are under a military system without basic human rights as Palestinians. I was really optimistic from what I saw in Israel that it's ending the occupation is possible. So if we have the same figures in Israel, the pilots, the doctors, the engineers, that mainstream in Israel who are not fanatic, they really stand up for Palestinian rights and for ending the occupation. So it's possible. This kind of protest, it gives us hope that one day that the Israelis and the Palestinians will be able to protest together to make a better future for all of us. But until now, the Israeli system, the Israeli military system, is really oppressing us to the moment that we can't even resist peacefully, that we can't even say no to the occupation, and we can't really participate in anything like that. So this is something very important to address, that we are not equal with this is why I say it's apartheid. There is no equality even if we use non-violent resistance. I hope that the Israelis understand that Ben Gvir and Smotrich, the right-wing extremists, they grew up in West Bank. They are the rulers of West Bank since very long time. They are the ones who are controlling the West Bank now. They are the ones who tell the army what to do in the West Bank. They are the ones who have all the resources in the West Bank. I don't have water in my house today because the settlers get 10 times more water than me. So we want more Israelis to be engaged. We want more Israelis to be aware. I want more Israelis to show solidarity, in spite that the military system doesn't allow them until now to show real solidarity with the Palestinians. So the army prevents Israelis from showing solidarity. And one of the examples is in last November, after Shabbat Sarah, a big pogrom happened in Hebron. Settlers attacked Palestinian houses. The Israeli soldiers beat up an Israeli visitor who came to show solidarity, and it was disputed between the left and the right about that the soldier is the victim who attacked the Israeli visitor, or the visitor was the victim. We were not part of it. I was arrested, ill-treated, my house was searched. I was not part of it. I was away because I don't exist as a Palestinian. I can say that loud without making the occupation costly for the occupier. For the occupiers, nothing will change. So this is what we should all work on together, and not to be shy to report the reality from the ground. When we say apartheid, it's apartheid. So Israel should be labeled as a country which practicing apartheid with the Palestinians and oppression and suppression. And I have to go now. So I was very happy to talk to all of you. I hope to see you in Hebron. Come see the situation in Hebron and then understand the reality of the occupation. And all the audience who are seeing us here now, please come to Hebron, come to Palestine, and watch how the Palestinians are living. And without making the occupation costly, think about it, nothing will change. And Ben Gvir and Smotrich will be much stronger if we don't stop them now. And we call it that they want to do a kind of Hebronization from the river to the sea. what you saw in Hebron, what you know about Hebron, the segregation, the separation, the obvious apartheid will be in East Jerusalem, will be in Lod, will be in Jaffa, will be all over. This is what Ben Gvir and Smotrich are working to do now, that they want to divide even everybody from the river to the sea.
Thank you so much for joining us, Issa. I know that you've got so much to do, so thank you for taking the time with us today, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. We're back now with Avner and Shira. Shira, I want to pick up a couple of things that Issa spoke about. One is the broader, what he described as the Hebronization of the rest of the occupation, to kind of export the microcosm out, and also the fact that at the end of the day, Ben Gvir and Smotrich have very key roles to play in what's happening, and they are very much they are the kind of at the core of the settlement movement. How much does the very grim picture that Issa painted in many ways, and the picture that has been the same for so long, how much does that change does it change ACRI's, does it change the broader anti-occupation movement? How much does it adjust your strategy in trying to deal with these issues, the new government, this uptick in violence? How have you shifted your theory of change into how you achieve a reality that is the opposite of what Issa described?
Well, I think in many ways, the theory of change itself hasn't changed, right? Because unlike what we're seeing in Israel, when there is, for some people, kind of a 180 transformation in how things are working, which is not accurate, but the end of the day, if the legal reform will be kind of, established, then of course, the Israel that we know will no longer exist. When we're talking about the West Bank, when we're talking about the occupation, we are not talking about necessarily a 180 shift. We are talking about accelerations of processes that have already been existed. And we are talking about kind of a mask removal, if you will, right? If before it was maybe a little bit trickier to explain what is going on in the West Bank, or why is the occupation that Israel is having over the Palestinians is in fact an illegal occupation for many years, why in fact Israel is actually participating in the crime of apartheid in the West Bank. Today, when you have an official policy that is in the foundation lines of the government that is saying that the Jewish people have indisputable right to all parts of Israel, then you understand that this process that you have tried to explain that is moving forward is actually coming to kind of its peak moment. And I think this is the change that we're seeing from something that has been growing, sometimes slowly, sometimes less, in the last 20 or so years. Now we are in a peak moment, in a sense of the people in power within the government are the people who are being pushing for the policy of annexation, of the policy of discrimination and dispossession in the West Bank. They are finally got their golden moment, and they are utilizing it to its fullest. So in a sense, it's not that our strategy is changing, is that our strategy have to adapt to the fact that things are going to happen faster, and to the fact that if the so-called legal reform will be completed, the very few kind of checks and balances that we had until now, we had very limited option to protect human rights in the West Bank. And some of them was via the courts, who were willing to still, not often, but sometimes, still defend rights, specifically rights around private lands. But those kind of stopping mechanisms, or balancing mechanisms, if you will, are being weakened and are possibly going to be silenced completely if the full-on legal revolution will be successful, and also what they are planning regarding the military regime in the West Bank. They are trying to kind of change key elements in the way that this regime works, in order to allow themselves to move much more faster in accomplishing everything that they have been trying to accomplish for many years. And none of this is a secret. Everything has been written out. Everything has been talked about in very clear working plans and articles. Just now arrived to the moment that they can finally accomplish everything in a much more faster and aggressive way.
Avner, did you want to chime in on this? I think that there's, I mean, how much is breaking the silences? How much has there been an adjustment there? And I'm also curious, again, in light of this op-ed, and we'll share it around, this op-ed that you had in Haaretz, where you said you don't have great expectations of the opposition leaders in the Knesset to kind of click into this. They might be opposing things on a political level, but they don't necessarily get, or to the extent they do get, care about the broader picture. Are you seeing similar things to Shira?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that as we've seen, and this is a deep sickness of the Israeli political system, and maybe many political systems. It's always about sort of a direct response, and I think a lot of what we're seeing, which sort of forced also 5 elections, and also sort of the way the previous government acted, is sort of the leaders of the opposition, and namely Gantz and Lapid. I mean, with all due respect to Labor, talking about a pretty small party at this point, where Gantz and Lapid are constantly looking over their shoulder to get their approval from their political opponents. And this basically creates a inability of the center, political center, the center left, to actually take hold of the opportunities. And I think probably the most significant missed opportunity, I had sort of an optimistic point before, so maybe a pessimistic point now, is the biggest thing that we, and this definitely affects our, me and sort of our ecosystem as well, where we're miserably failing, is seeing this moment as a moment that could be a moment of bridge building with Palestinian citizens. And I'm not exactly sure what that bridge looks like, but when you have a government that basically legitimizes and backs Jewish supremacists, and that's a harsh term, but it's the harsh reality. Ben Gvir and Smotrich, or Avi Maoz, and even though he left the government, I think is an opportunity where I think not only because it's right, but also on a strategical point, could be a point where at least Lapid starts building himself as a leader of the center left, and actually moves on what we know took place in closed rooms and make it sort of more public, which is a potential pact with Arab Israeli or Palestinian Israeli leaders. That's not happening. And I think the moment that is not happening, that also, it doesn't only affect the political pact, but it also doesn't allow the right kind of conversation to take place. Because if we're constantly censoring, ideas and groups from being, part of the sort of public discourse, that is a very clear path that will just embolden the Netanyahu camp, or the pro-occupation camp, and will not allow us to move beyond this moment. Maybe the protest will give us some gains, but in the long run, it's not about winning the next news cycle. It's about thinking about an actual coherent, or at least a political camp that knows how to work together.
I think that's an excellent point. I think that we're going to finish on and let these. We've already let one incredible activist go about to do his activism. We're now going to let the other two that we have go about their activism for the rest of the day. So I want to thank both Avner and Shira for joining us. And like Michael said at the beginning of the call, and I want to use one of Avner's final points as a segue, NIF was built for this moment because we've been working on so many of these issues for a long time, and it allows us now to really ramp up our investment, acknowledge the opportunities that exist, and try to achieve the outcomes that we've been pushing for so long. And in one of those ways that we're doing it locally in Australia is by supporting the local protests in solidarity with Israeli protesters. Those are happening every Sunday in Sydney and Melbourne, and I think that those are important to join if you're able to. The real focus of the work I think that we have now is how we can direct our supporters here in Australia to the work that's happening in Israel. I'm hoping there'll be a QR code on your screen either now or at least very soon on top of Shira's head, unfortunately. If you sit up, Shira, then you can get out of its way. So I want to emphasize again that this moment is important. I know people are searching for a way that they can have a positive impact, and I really want to emphasize that NIF is that way. We need at this moment for people to dig deep and support the work that we have. This QR code will take you to a donate screen where we're going to zoom in on three particular things that NIF is funding at this moment. One is directly the work of ACRI, where Shira is, working on work in the occupied territories, working with protesters, working to defend the civil and human rights of everyone who lives under Israeli control. That's an incredibly important thing that we need to do. The second thing, which is the segue from what Avner said, is funding organizations like the Tzedek Centers, who many of our supporters and donors will have met when they were in Australia a couple of weeks ago, or even heard on the radio and in the media on Plus 61J and on Radio National where they were last week, who are building Jewish-Arab partnership in order to build the capacity in the political space to achieve the change that Avner is talking about. The third thing that we're really emphasizing are our emergency grants. This is a huge boost that NIF all around the world is trying to make in civil society. Just a couple of months ago now, which is a long time in the context of where Israeli and Palestinian politics is going, we gave an emergency grant to a humanitarian aid program called Mothers for Mothers, where Jewish Israeli women, mothers, got donations for humanitarian aid to take to Palestinian mothers in Masafer Yatta in Area C of the West Bank in the South Hebron Hills in order to create a little bit of just extra things that Palestinians need. So we can deal with it on the legal level with ACRI. We can deal with it by building Jewish-Arab partnership in Israel, but we can also do it by providing the very real resources that Palestinians need on a short-term level. So please scan the code, dig deep, and think about how you can make that contribution, because I know that this is the time that we want to be thinking about how to be part of the solution to push back against the horrific news that we see. And we have the power to do that, right? NIF is your power to do that. So with that, again, I want to thank everyone for joining us. I want to particularly thank Avner and Shira and Issa, who's already gone to more things in his day, and wish you all a good night. So thank you very much.